Hey everybody, it's Frozen and thank you for joining me today. I'm going to talk about my big three, so backpack, shelter, and sleep system. So I got a lot of comments and questions about hammock specific topics, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the backpack side of things, but let's just get them out of the way first. So I started off February 23rd with the Zpacks Arc haul. And I have a full review on the channel, and I think for the most part that review is still going to hold true. Not many things that I dislike about this pack. In fact, I really enjoyed the pack, except for a couple things which I do want to touch on right now. First off, this pack has a frame. It's basically a hip belt, and then the weight transfers to your hips via two carbon stays that are removable and replaceable. On my hike, however, one of the carbon stays, I actually still have yet to replace it because I ordered the wrong size from Zpacks, but the one stay started fraying pretty bad. I didn't want to put the Arc in it after that because I was worried that I would kind of break it in half completely. But like I said, it's replaceable, so not a big deal, and they're pretty cheap on zpacks.com. Now first, let me preface this by saying that this pack has about 1,100 or maybe even 1,200 miles on it. I used this way before the AT thru hike, and this used to be my go-to pack. Since then, my gear has gotten a little bit lighter, and I've switched to another pack, which we're going to get into in just a second here. But there is no durability issues with this. The back panel that you kind of press up against your back is perfect, no wear and tear in that. Even the mesh pocket on the back doesn't have any signs of wear and tear, no holes whatsoever. And water bottle pockets are perfect. Everything about the pack is perfect. But the one thing that did really bother me on the trail, and again, this is a removable piece, so I can always get another hip belt, which I do plan on doing. Zpacks is a great company. I have no problems with them, enjoy all their products, but I think they're going through some quality control issues, just very minor stuff that they just need to look over before this stuff goes back out. And what happened to me was on the right side of my hip, this webbing right here was sewn at two different angles. So this bottom side right here was sewn completely correct. It was coming out straight onto my hip, but this, the sewing on here is actually angled down a little bit. So what was happening is I was putting the pack on my waist, and because the top webbing was stitched wrong, was angled wrong, it was causing the right hip belt to bunch up and actually dig into my waist. Other than that, this pack worked out perfect for me, and I had really no problems whatsoever with it, but I do plan on getting another hip belt. So that takes care of that pack. Right before the 700 mile mark, which is right before Dragon's Tooth, I decided to swap to my Light AF Curve 35 liter backpack and continue to use this backpack until I reached Katahdin, and this will be my pack from now on for 3-season weather. I chose to do that. I chose to drop the Arc haul, not because it was giving me problems, but because I was switching down to my lighter gear, my 3-season gear. And that was just a lot lighter. It was actually 5 pounds different. So swapped to a frameless pack in the Curve 35, and I absolutely love this thing. Didn't have any issues except for a mistake that I personally made that caused the Dyneema on the back to actually wear a hole in itself because I was wearing the fanny pack wrong. So we'll get into that more in a in-depth review. If you'd like to see that, which is going to be done in the next couple weeks, be sure to check the suggested videos, and I'll throw it up when I finish it. But this is the pack that I finished with, and I loved every second wearing this. But like I said, check that in-depth review for more information. For my entire AT thru hike, I wanted to sleep in a hammock, and I did that in my dream hammock, Darien, with my hammock gear, Cuben fiber, Dyneema composite fabric, tarp, and both handled exceptionally well. So let me go over a couple things about the hammock. This is my dream hammock Darien. It has a 1.2 Robic XL fabric. It is 10 feet long by 63 inches wide, and me being 5'6", that was really perfect for me. If you're a larger fella or a larger gal, then I'd recommend, sizing up, going with different fabrics, etc., etc. But you can learn more at dreamhammock.com. I do have a ridgeline on this, and I have a little ridgeline organizer by Dutchwear. This was perfect that I needed to put in extra clothes, socks, electronics, anything that I really needed on here, and this held up great as well. This is my suspension of choice. It's a titanium cinch buckle, and it's made by Dutchwear. This is working out great. There's no abrasion on the continuous loops or the webbing, which is Dyneema Polypro mix, I believe, from Dutchware as well. This handled great, no issues, no abrasion, and I connect everything with a Jeff Myers EvoLoop. I like EvoLoops, which is basically a continuous loop with a button knot on it made of Amsteel, same stuff this is made from. And I like this more than attaching a carabiner or running the webbing through, just because of ease of use. And I definitely like it more than the Dutchware Dutch clips, because I've noticed that those cause some abrasion where they connect. If you want some more information, check out my beginner hammock camping series. You'll find a lot of info in there. As far as my tarp and putting it around a tree, I just use a Dutchware continuous ridgeline. It has a wasp on one side and a little clip on the other side, and that connects to a prusik knot down to a Dyneema composite fabric hammock gear tarp. The tarp is 11 foot, and one of the things that I would change, I would definitely go with another Dyneema tarp, because this is, as of now, 3 years old, and it lasted an entire through hike with no issues whatsoever. However, I just wish it was a little longer. And I just checked Hammock Gear's website, and I see that they're now making their tarps a little wider. And so that's great. I think I'd probably get another one of those, but I might look into different vendors now that I've seen a couple different vendors on the trail. Now this hammock does have doors on it, and I opted for the doors just because for the extra weight, you may as well get it anyway unless you're going with a longer tarp. And these worked out awesome on the trail, and I feel like I actually needed these at some points just to keep the wind and the rain out. When I didn't have the doors deployed, what I would do is I just have a little piece of shock cord attached to the guy out points, and those are attached to a couple mitten clips. When I wanted to deploy the doors, I would just take a mitten clip off and connect that clip down to the guy lines of the tarp, and that worked out well. But I will stress that, man, if you're gonna have a 10-foot hammock and 11-foot tarp, definitely opt for the doors or get a longer tarp. It'll just give you some more coverage, and that's what I really needed out there, was coverage. Connecting the tarp to your stake, all I had was some shock cord here, went down to a Dutchware hookworm, which was really easy to do. Check out my beginner hammock camping series, like I keep saying, down to a guy line, and this connected to an MSR groundhog. I have 4 MSR groundhogs, and I also stake out the sides of the hammock since it is asymmetrical to those. I only had one of those pull out at one point on Garfield shelter. Coming down Garfield was crazy, and I knew it was going to be a really windy night. I just didn't know it was going to be that windy. Luckily, the stake that came out of the ground got caught in between a rock before it completely disconnected. It was actually a really good thing, because I would have got soaked had that actually come out the whole way. But other than that, perfect. Groundhogs were perfect. As far as my pillow, you don't need one in a hammock, but I opted one just to make it a little bit more comfortable. This is a C2 Summit Aeros Ultralight, and this weighs under 2 ounces. I think it's 1.8, 1.9 ounces. And this was all I needed. This was perfect. I didn't have any issues with the valve leaking or tears or any durability issues like that at all. As far as quilts, I had 2 sets of quilts. What you're looking at right now is a Hammock Gear 40-degree top quilt and a 30-degree Enlightened Equipment under quilt. And I felt that that was adequate for my 3-season weather when I switched on April 6th. Now, since I started on February 23rd, what I had done was I opted for a set of 20-degree Hammock Gear quilts, which worked out great. However, there were some very windy nights on the trail, and on those nights, I really wish I had something called an underquilt protector, which is just a thin piece of fabric like the hammock that goes underneath of the underquilt, which kind of blocks out the wind and keeps all the warmth inside. What happens was, when the wind blows, you have a big issue with convection. And with the convection, it would definitely rob the warmth out of your entire underquilt, and you'll be forced to pretty much start over, recollecting all the warmth within the down. So if you're planning an early start to your through hike, like February 23rd, like I did, I really highly recommend you get some kind of hammock sock, or just a simple underquilt protector will definitely do the job there. And I had 3 nights of really bad sleep because of not carrying an underquilt protector. So I really suggest that you do pick one up before you start your hike. There wasn't any single night where I had a problem setting up due to lack of trees or just improperly spaced trees. What I would do, however, I knew where I was going to camp usually beforehand unless I was stealth siting. And when I say stealth, I mean finding a campsite that was pre-established that wasn't a shelter site. So that's what I'm talking about. Nothing illegal here. I always obeyed the rules and didn't have really any problems finding any kind of hammock sites along the way. But what I would check is I would make sure I wasn't on any kind of mountain ridgeline where there obviously were no trees. I made sure I wasn't on a bald or any kind of field like that where only tents would work. Just things like that that you need to research before, whether it be an AWOL guide or Guthook, which I highly recommend. There really wasn't a time where I was struggling to find trees. I think maybe one night there was a really windy night that I opted to go lower in elevation just to get out of the wind. But other than that, everything just kind of worked out with the hammocks. That was something I was really worried about before I started the AT was, what if I can't find a spot for my hammock? And that never happened. So for those people that are really worried about that, as long as you're careful in your site selections for the day, as far as, don't stay on a bald or in a field or again on top of a ridgeline like that, you shouldn't have any problems finding a decent spot to hang your hammock. That being said, at the shelter sites, I never had a problem, but sometimes I had to camp pretty close to a privy due to widowmakers or just bad brush or thorns or something like that. But again, never had a problem actually finding a spot to sleep that night. There were also some spots that I could stay in that tents would just not work. And I like staying in those spots because most of those spots were awesome and I just had a good night's sleep at those. So I definitely recommend a hammock on an AT thru hike, no problems whatsoever. As far as having the privacy, a lot of people were talking about privacy, how do you get dressed in the morning? Well, what you do is you just get under your quilt, get changed, which I did every night. I had sleep clothes along the way, which I changed into every single night. In the morning, put my hiking clothes back on. I actually hung my damp hiking clothes up on this ridgeline and everything worked out perfectly. They could dry. Sometimes I hung my socks on this shock cord for the doors. Again, that worked perfectly. Everything dried out very nicely in the morning, usually, unless they were soaked. And I hung my gaiters down here on my hammock pull-out for my head and my foot end. So now, sometimes my hammock suspensions were wet, the webbing that comes down to the hammock, to the cinch buckle. I would just take those completely off, which is really easy to do, and I would just shove them in my mesh pocket in my backpack and let them dry out the next day. Worked out perfectly fine, and everything kind of stuffed into a double-ended Z-Packs stuff sack. So again, really no issues whatsoever with the hammock. I really enjoyed sleeping in the hammock. I don't really get a good night's sleep on the ground, and I woke up refreshed pretty much every morning when there wasn't any kind of wind issue. And like we were talked about already, I would opt next time for either an underquilt protector or maybe a wider tarp. So if you guys have any questions about my hammock shelter setup, feel free to ask. Be sure you check out the beginner hammock camping series. I have it linked above in the suggested videos, and feel free to ask questions. I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.